Hello and welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel. I'm back for another preview. My first preview in a few weeks, actually. Ben has been doing a lot of these for us recently as I've had a couple of other things on, but I am very happy to be back this week as I am joined by Dave from BBC Radio Derby to be talking all about Burton Albion, who are, of course, our opposition on Saturday in what is the reverse leg of our first game of the season. So we are at this point of the campaign once again. Dave, first of all, thank you so much for coming on. How are you doing?
Pleasure to be here, Charlie, and nice to see somebody other than Ben as well. I think there's no doubt about that, and everybody else will be pleased as well.
Trust me, yeah, most people say the exact same thing. No, absolutely. Like you say, you do typically kind of speak to Ben, and I think he was a little bit disappointed, actually, that I was doing this one, and he couldn't sit down and chat with you, or at least that's what he told me to tell you anyway. So whether that's actually true or not, or whether he just wanted to try and butter you up for next season. No, but absolutely. So let's talk Burton Albion, because it's been a bit of an interesting season. It was certainly quite an interesting summer last year, wasn't it? What we're kind of thinking back to then, last summer, the transfer window that you had, quite a bit of money being spent. You know, you could look at it as a potential kind of naivety, the amount of money that was being spent on certain players and things like that, however you kind of want to perceive it. How did you think the season was going to go? And are you shocked that you're in the position you're in now in kind of February time?
Well, the first thing I've got to say is I'm delighted to think you'll be speaking to me next season, for obvious reasons. It was a fascinating summer because there was the takeover, which happened relatively late in the summer, and then they brought in Mark Robinson as the head coach from Chelsea, who was with their under-21s, and Tom Hounsell joined him as his assistant, and he was with Fulham's under-21s. And they went out and they did spend money. There's no question about it. But they also signed a lot of players on relatively little money on long contracts in the hope that they could sell them on, and there'd be big, obviously, sell-on clauses in there as well for the clubs that they'd got them from. They played just 2 pre-season matches before they played Lincoln City in the opening game of the season, and did okay, but only 2 friendlies. And you thought, well, 23 players coming through the door, and they've only played twice in any kind of semi-competitive way might be a problem. The first game of the season against Lincoln City was an absolute belter. I know Lincoln won 3-2, but it was an absolute belter of a game. There was great football being played by both sides. There were 5 goals, and you're thinking, oh, well, that's okay. I'm going to be entertained at least. Second game, they go to Mansfield, drew 3-3, only lost with a last-minute or injury time penalty, which was a little bit dubious to say the least. And you're thinking everything's going to be great. Then I went back to doing my other job, which is Derbyshire cricket, and missed the next 2 games, which were both 0-0 draws. And you thought, well, that's a bit strange, but at least they've shored it up at the back. And then when I went back to watching them, they were neither shored up at the back nor scoring goals anymore, and it just fell apart. It fell apart alarmingly. And I think everybody associated with Burton Albion, the supporters, were very excited. The new era. I mean, Ben Robinson had been in charge of the club since it was in the Northern Premier and the Southern Premier League. That's how long the chairman had been there who sold the club. And they've been used to stability with Nigel Clough before recent years, when they've had quite a turnover of managers. And everybody was quite excited. The excitement evaporated quite quickly, as it tends to do when you're not winning games of football, doesn't it? And then Mark Robinson disappeared after he lost 7 successive league matches and left them in a bit of a pickle. His assistant, Tom Hounsell, who's just gone in as the head coach, or the assistant coach rather, first team coach at Wycombe, took over for 10 matches, during which time he managed to get them through an FA Cup tie against Scarborough and get knocked out of the FA Cup by rivals Tamworth, missing out on a home game with Tottenham in the 3rd round, which didn't go down very well. He picked up a couple of wins, one at home to Shrewsbury, one away to Stevenage, but it wasn't working. It wasn't working at all. And then there was a huge U-turn from the ownership group. They'd already lost the chairman, or he was going to go in January. He's gone back to Scandinavia. It's the Nordic Football Group who've taken over.
Yeah.
And then Bendik Hairada, who was the sporting director, he had to go back home for family reasons, and he's since left completely.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they were very visible to start with, they're not quite as visible now, but they threw pretty much everything out by appointing Gary Bowyer. And people have been crying out for, he's still titled head coach, but I rather fancy he might be the manager. For somebody who knew the division, somebody with a bit of experience at this level, and it's a horrible thing to say, but Mark Robinson had a brief spell at Wimbledon. Tom Hounsell hasn't done any senior coaching, if you like, at first team level. And you knew at the time, they were probably 8-9 points adrift at that point. They lost the first game under him against Exeter City to an absolute stunner of a goal, and you thought, well, this is going to go wrong as well then. And at one point, there were 12 points adrift, and you think, well, they've got no chance. And his first 2 away games over Christmas, because he came in at the end of December, he had that Christmas period. So, of course, he barely had any training sessions with anybody. So he's got playing football, Boxing Day, the game in between Boxing Day, New Year's Day. I mean, it was chaos, absolute chaos. They went to Birmingham on Boxing Day and Huddersfield Town in the following match. And you could see signs. Nobody believed me at the time. Nobody who wasn't watching them certainly believed me at the time. But you could see signs that he was putting a bit of something into them, and he was talking them up as you would expect a new manager to do. And eventually he got his first win, and it sort of went on from there. But since he arrived, more than half of their total points have been secured, and they've come in the last 8 matches. More than half of their total points for the season have come in the last 8 matches, and 2/3 of their league wins have come in that period as well. It shows you what a mess they were up until Gary Bowyer arrived. And we'd had these 23 signings coming in the summer, and lots of players going out, and some players out of favour. The likes of Kegs Chowke, who probably play, he missed the game against Stevenage in midweek, but he'd probably play against Lincoln. Not Ryan Sweeney, Mason Bennett, who was completely out in the cold. He's now back as part of the squad. And a lot of the players who were signed in the summer, Elliot Watt's gone to Scotland. Danilo Orsi's playing with MK. Ben Whitfield's gone back to Barrow. Billy Bowden's on loan. These are all on loan. He's gone to Reading. Jack Cooper-Love's in Holland now, having signed from Denmark, I think it was. He shipped a load out and he's brought a load in. And I was looking it up. I by my reckoning, of the players who started the game against Lincoln on the opening day of the season, there will be just 2 in the starting lineup when we come to Lincoln at the weekend. And of the players who started Gary Bowyer's first game at the end of December, there will be 4 players left in that starting lineup. So we're basically watching 2 different teams. And I think, there were a lot of boos at Broadhall Way, as you can imagine. And they didn't play poorly necessarily, Stevenage. They had a lot of chances near the end. We'll perhaps talk about that game a bit more. But people are now playing Burton. Same happened at Wigan, where they won. People are looking at Burton and going, well, bottom 2, bottom 3, bottom 4 as it is now. This will be an easy win. They're a completely different side. Their league position now is false. And you've only got to look at the form guide, whether you take 6 matches or 8 matches. They're sort of top 6, top 7 at the moment in terms of form. And I would urge any supporters to just take that into consideration before you get on your side's back if they're not absolutely steamrolling Burton, because Burton were steamrolled a lot in the early part of the season. They conceded 1 goal, that was it, game over. They've come back from being a goal down on a number of occasions with Gary Bowyer. They were 2-0 up against Reading, who got back to 2-2, and they scored in the 93rd minute. They keep going. They're not a side who gives up anymore, and that's the biggest difference. So that all the excitement, going back to your original question, all the excitement in the summer evaporated very quickly, but it's now back. There's a connection between the players and the fans again, which the supporters love, don't they? The last thing a supporter wants is to be sort of a long way away from the playing staff and all the rest of it. Gary Bowyer talks about the supporters all the time. The players on Tuesday night at Stevenage actually went into the away end. There weren't many there, but they went in and actually were having selfies taken and signing autographs for the people who've gone in freezing temperatures to watch their side at Stevenage. So it's the excitement is back. I turned up for a game at Burton. I'm just looking at the fixture list here because I can't remember which one it was. It was Rotherham, I think, possibly Reading, and it was the first game I'd looked forward to going to since the Mansfield game, really, at the start of the season, because you knew what was going to happen. They insisted on playing out from the back. They weren't good enough to do it. They never put crosses into the box. They weren't allowed to do it. And this is a League One side. I understand the model, and teams much, much higher up the food chain than Burton are doing it, Brentford and Brighton, buying players who nobody's really heard of and selling them on at a huge profit and being sustainable that way. The club wants to be sustainable. But you're not going to be sustainable if you drop down a division and with the prospect of, well, look what's happened to Carlisle, dropping down again. You don't want to go into non-league because you're not getting back. You're not getting back. And your value is virtually zero. So the excitement's back. There was excitement, then there was a lot of non-excitement, but now the excitement's back.
Well, it certainly seems like it. And it certainly seems like you've certainly got quite a lot of excitement again about Burton Albion, just the way that you were talking about them there. And you know what? Just from like the outside looking in, that first game of the season, I mean, it was one hell of a game, wasn't it? Let's be honest. It was an incredible game of football, taking away kind of the fandom out of it. And for me, watching our side win, that didn't matter. It was just the game itself. Well, obviously it did matter, but the game itself was just a cracking game of football. And I watched that, and it kind of reaffirmed some of my beliefs about Burton going into the season anyway. I'd kind of had the idea that, look, they were probably going to try and, it's maybe a bit of an archaic term nowadays because I think every team in the EFL particularly tries to do it, but they were clearly going to try and play football. And whether or not it would actually work, after a few months, a little bit further down the line. Also, bearing in mind the pitch at the Pirelli, whether that would actually take a more ball on the ground style of football throughout the whole season would have remained to have been seen and all that. But then, obviously, again, it seemed to just very quickly go out of the window in terms of whether that style was actually going to turn into results, which, as you kind of say, the excitement clearly was getting drained out of Burton on a regular basis because of that. And obviously, you very much turned things around. Now, obviously, you kind of spoke there about the fact that it really has turned around, and obviously it has. Your last 5 games, 2 wins, 2 draws, okay, and a loss in there, but that loss, they are much fewer and far between since realistically, like say Boxing Day against Birmingham, you beat Stevenage last night with a 1-0 win. Granted, there was a red card in there as well, which we'll touch on in a little bit. But there was that week, wasn't there, where it was Rotherham and Reading, where, okay, yes, there may have been a few goals conceded, but there was plenty goals scored as well. What that kind of change, is it a massive change in terms of style? Are you still maybe just leaking a few more goals than you'd maybe like, but considering some of the scorelines, you're able just to simply score more? What is that kind of big change, apart from the kind of obvious intangibles that Gary Bowyer has brought in, which is that kind of man management style that was maybe needed to really rally the troops?
There has been a change of style. There's no question about it. They're now playing with 3 centre-backs. Whether they do or not, and this goes back to the sending off of Terence Van Kooten on Tuesday night, whether or not they continue to play 3 centre-backs against Lincoln, I'm not entirely sure, because they are running out of players. They only named 6 on the bench at Broadhall Way, which is a bit of a concern. But what they've done is they've started playing with wing-backs. Now, Udoka Godwin-Malief was at the club at the very start of the season. I don't think he played. In fact, I'm certain he didn't play against Lincoln in that opening game of the season. He'd been played at right back and at right centre back, but he's clearly an attacking player. So he's getting forward on the right. And Owen Dodson, who's coming on loan from Burnley, is playing as the left wing back, and his delivery is as good as anything I've seen this season, quite frankly, with his left foot, set pieces as well as in open play. And from a team that steadfastly refused to put the ball into the penalty area from wide areas, and it would have been pointless had they done so because their main striker was Danilo Orsi, who's 2'6". They've gone to a side now with a slightly bigger striker in John Daddy Bodvarsson, who people will have heard of, and Rumaan Burrell, who was at the club, one of the summer signings, but wasn't getting a look in. He signed from Cove Rangers in Scotland, the other team in Aberdeen. And from the 1st of January till now, they've got 10 goals between them. Rumaan Burrell's got 8 goal involvements, including 6 goals and a couple of assists, including the one against Stevenage. And they are putting the ball in the box. And they've now got midfielders who are willing to get into the box as well. One of them you may have heard of, called JJ McKiernan, who has been absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I dread to think how good the Lincoln City midfield is if they can afford not to play him. That's all I'm saying about JJ. And I know that he won't be playing at the weekend, unfortunately. Just the stupid rule, in my opinion, that says you can't play against your parent club. What's he going to do? Throw the game? I don't think so.
I hope so.
Yeah, perhaps he would. So they've got a midfield that's got more balance now. Charlie Webster, who was injured at the start of the season, got sent off against Charlton for a moment of petulance. He's only young, but he signed from Chelsea, and there was a huge fanfare about him because he was going to be the next big thing once upon a time at Chelsea. He went across to play in Holland last season in the Eredivisie, so he got a bit of experience. But he just wasn't. You wanted more from him, and you had to keep reminding yourself that at that time he's only just turned 21. He was 20 years of age and relatively inexperienced. So all of a sudden, that's all clicked. The centre backs, terrific. Again, Van Kooten unfortunately won't be involved for a few weeks, and we all know what Wrexham have got, don't we? I mean, Mullins not getting a game at the moment, and the lad who signed from Wimbledon, the 7-foot-tall one, he's not getting a game because they just go out and spend millions on strikers, don't they? So Bob Barson played 3 games at the start of the season, or in the first half of the season, and was told by Wrexham, if you can find another club, off you go. How Gary Bowyer persuaded him to come to Burton, I have no idea. But he's just been fantastic. And there was a huge lack of experience in that side earlier on in the season. Billy Bowden's got experience, but and he's a good player, don't get me wrong. I don't think he has that presence that Bob Barson has. He's a huge man and such a good striker. And he's brought Rumaan Burrell on no end. But the main difference is that the goal at Stevenage was a really well worked goal that started with ball at feet inside their own half. So I don't want to give the impression that all that they do is lump it forward and hope that it bounces kindly. So that was a really well worked goal, and there have been other really well worked goals. But now they're more than happy to put the ball into the penalty area. And if you've got a couple of strikers who are in form, and you hope that they stay in form from longer rather than shorter a period of time, you've got a chance, haven't you? Whereas before they just wouldn't put it in the area. They would never take a long goal kick. They would never just clear the ball into row Z when they were defending. The perfect example was at Reading, where they were more than a match for Reading, and both sides were this earlier in the season. Not the win they had the other week. And at half-time, they were 2-0 down, and they were 2-0 down because twice players tried to dribble the ball out of their own penalty area and pick a pass and gave it away, and Reading scored. And you think, well, this is totally unsustainable. You want that mix, don't you? You want that mix of if it's dangerous, get rid. If you can play the ball forward to a teammate who's closer to the halfway line, who can turn and carry on, do that. So they're sort of mixing it up a bit more now than they were. They were just hell bent on playing football, very much like an under-21 side would. And it's not surprising because both the manager or the head coach and his assistant came out of the under-21 system. So if you're taking people out of a system where results don't really matter, it's about performances, it's about development. And the amount of times I heard the word development in those first 3 months of the season, God, Bennett. And now it's about winning games of football. And I don't know about you, and you sort of gave it away because the game at the Pirelli Stadium was a really, really good game of football. It was, as we said, 5 goals, lots of good football from both sides. It was everything you want as a neutral in a game of football. But ultimately, when you said, well, it didn't really matter who won, it does matter who wins, doesn't it? You wanted Lincoln to win. If I go with my team Tranmere, I want them to. I don't care how they do it, but I want them to win. Of course, if you play rubbish football and you lose all the time, then you've got a major issue. But even playing good football and losing all the time doesn't really do it for supporters, in my experience. And it's sort of reached plumbed the depths. I'm just going to look up. Apologies for this. October time, certainly the game that Charlie Webster was sent off in, actually, against Charlton. The crowd was under 1,700. People had given up. They'd genuinely given up. An awful lot of supporters just said, "Nah, I'm not going while this is being played." As attractive as it might have been, they weren't winning. They were losing 7 in a row, as I said, under Mark Robinson before he got the sack. Supporters won't put up with that, and quite right too. As nice a bloke and brilliant to deal with as Mark Robinson was, they had to do something. Of course, then they dillied and dallied, and Tom Hounsell, who was the caretaker or the interim, as they now call them, was there for 10 matches, which is far too long.
Yeah.
And then Gary Bowyer comes in and sort of had to hit the ground running. Didn't quite, because to start with, he couldn't win a game. But then he brought some players in. He managed to turn it round. And once you start winning games of football, the players buy into it, don't they? Whereas I think they totally zoned out in the previous 2 head coaches, but they're buying into it. They've got Pat Lyons there as well, who's former Derby County academy coach, as Gary Bowyer was. That's where they first met. He's come from the FA. They've kept John Brayford as well, which I think is a terrific move because John Brayford and Burton Albion synonymous. Jake King, goalkeeping coach, has stayed as well. So there's still that little link, along with Ryan Sweeney and Max Crocombe, with the past, but everybody's looking forward now. But they have changed the way they play. They're just mixing it up a bit more. They like to counter. They do like to counter, and they've got pace on both wings. And up front with Burrell. Burrell's a really pacey striker. Good finisher, as it turns out. Who knew? And obviously, Bodvarsson is somebody who, if you look up and you can only see the strikers out the corner of your eye, you're going to see him because he stands out sore thumb with his long hair and his broad shoulders.
It's certainly going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on some of those players, even though, like you say, you don't really need to keep much of an eye on Bodvarsson, do you? Because he will just stick out like a sore thumb. Absolutely. Whether you're in person watching it on the screen, no matter what. So taking a little look ahead to Saturday then, kind of after honestly really, really interesting kind of review of the season, and especially with kind of the managerial change in there as well. Looking ahead to Saturday, obviously you said you're not quite sure on the way the formation is going to be. Could throw up a couple of surprises. We've also mentioned JJ McKiernan, who, first of all, really good to hear how well he's doing. As a project, in inverted commas, a project player at Lincoln who we've got for 4 years. First of all, to have him loaned out to another League One side is a huge bonus. Personally, that's the way I see it. I think it's fantastic. And obviously, if he's performing at such a high level as you're saying, then really, really pleased for both him and, quite frankly, for us for the football club to kind of hear that. But obviously, he won't be playing Saturday. Terence Van Kooten won't be playing Saturday because of his suspension, even though, they might try and appeal it. But let's be honest, probably a little bit less likely. Do you think those two players are going to make a massive difference to the team? And then I guess, are there kind of any other players who you're really sorely missing at the moment or expecting to maybe miss on Saturday that, again, could just show a couple of little weaknesses in what is some pretty stellar form recently?
Well, they signed James Jones from Wrexham when he was released.
Another former Lincoln lad.
Is he? Excellent. So he's missed the last two. He hasn't even been involved in the squad. Now, I'm not entirely sure of the nature of his injury and how long he's likely to be out. But with JJ McKiernan missing, he would be ideal to be available, because then they could. They think that Kegs Chowke, who missed out yesterday due to a slight back issue, he'll be okay. And they had Kyron Lofthouse, who's joined on loan from Barnsley. They played him in midfield to start with, then he moved back to right wing back when the sending off came. Now, Gary Bowyer told me that before he even played him in midfield, when he arrived, he said he's a great utility player, can play all the way along the back. And I've even seen him play in midfield at Gateshead. Gary Bowyer, the amount of games he must have watched when he was out of work, phenomenal. And he played him in midfield. He's played, as he pointed out at Stevenage, he's played in three positions. He's only made 2 appearances. So he may well fill in at centre-back or right wing-back. I prefer him to play centre-back because that would allow Godwin Malif to play as the right wing-back. He moved into centre-back. So they will miss Van Kooten. It will be a reshuffle. Last night, I keep saying last night, the Stevenage game, I know people watch these at all different times, don't they? Against Stevenage, it was the first time they changed their starting lineup in 7 matches. They played 6 games in a row with the same starting 11. I put it out there. When was the last time that happened in any kind of professional football? It just doesn't happen, does it? There's always a little tinker here or a little change there, but 6 successive matches in the same starting 11. Well, we knew he was going to have to leave. Make 1 change for Lincoln because McKiernan couldn't play. Well, he's going to have to make 2 changes, which might just disrupt it a little bit. McKiernan has been, of the 3 midfielders, Chowke's the one who wins the ball back. Charlie Webster is the one who makes the passes, and JJ McKiernan is the one who makes the runs. Those what they call third man runs, are they called these days? The late runs into the penalty area. He hit the crossbar against Stevenage from a Webster cross. So those 3 have worked really well together. Now, Chowke didn't play against Stevenage, but he'll come back. But there's still going to be somebody not playing where you would expect them to play necessarily. So whether it be Lofthouse in midfield with Chowke and Webster, I'm not sure if that would work. It might have to, or whether James Jones comes in. But then he's the Chowke kind of player who wins the tackles. So Kegs would have to go further forward, which he has done since Bowyer arrived. And who they're going to play as the 3 centre-backs. We know that Sweeney will be there, the captain. We know that a player who never gets mentioned, and I haven't mentioned, I think I've mentioned everybody else tonight, Jack Armour, who's played the left-sided of the centre-backs, has been outstanding, but he does nothing, he doesn't dazzle. He just does his job, and therefore never gets mentioned, which is a bit of a shame, really. And who plays that extra centre back? They won't change I don't think they'll change the shape because it's worked so well with the wing backs, and they want to get Dodgson forward. That's been key. And when he's been blocked off by teams, as he was to a large degree at Bristol Rovers, where they lost, and a game before that as well. Then there's space for other people because they put a couple of players on Dodgson. Make sure you're on Dodgson. Don't let him get the crosses in, or somebody else can do it. That's obviously how that one works. So, and I don't think the front 2 will change. I'd be absolutely staggered if the front 2 changed. They look. The first half at Bristol Rovers was the first time in this run where they hadn't made changes. That I looked at my summariser, Aaron Webster, who played hundreds of games for Burton Albion. Just thought, I wonder if they have gone one game too far. They're not quite as at it. And in the second half, they suddenly came to life. And then the first half, at Stevenage, they were even better. So I don't think fatigue is an issue. I know it's the third game in 8 days, but I mean, the professional athletes, for goodness sake, they should surely be able to do that. So yeah, the minimal changes. I would suggest it doesn't seem to be a lot of managers talk about horses for courses. Oh, a horse, yeah, we're going to concentrate on stopping the opposition from doing what they do. Well, I don't think he's too bothered about that. He makes sure that the players know the jobs that they have to do and who they should be marking at set pieces and all the rest of it. But I think he's more concerned about how his side plays, which is why I don't think he'll make more than a couple of changes to the starting 11. And he's got 1 or 2 injuries anyway. Jason Straha would have been perfect to come in, but he's injured, a centre-back who's had a terrific time in recent weeks, had done really well under Gary Bowyer at the start, played in the games at Birmingham and at Huddersfield, when they did perform well, despite only picking up 1 point from those 2 matches. I don't think many people are going to go to Birmingham and do too much, are they, given that they've spent £17 million or whatever, it's £15 million on a striker. I mean, it's obscene. If they don't go up, somebody needs shooting. That's only an opinion again. But yeah, I mean, they're clearly the team with the biggest result. You know, bring on Lyndon Dykes when Stansfield goes up.
Yeah.
What's that all about? It's not even fair, though, is it? Because there's no FFP in League One. Do what you want. Do what you want. And there are football clubs now who aren't too disappointed. I was going off topic, and I apologise. There are football clubs now who don't really worry too much if they do get relegated out of the Championship, where they are regulated, because they can regroup, as Birmingham City are doing, and fair play, take full advantage of it. But they regroup in League One. Ipswich, how much money did Ipswich spend? The signings they made in League One, it was a ready-made top of the Championship side when it went up. I mean, they were superb. But it's not fair. But then again, life's not fair, is it? So let's
be honest. It's not fair for us, sat comfortably or slightly less than comfortably in League One. It's not fair on us, but it's perfectly fair on the teams at the arse end of the Championship, isn't it? And that's the way they'll always look at it, because we know if we were in that position, there's that kind of level of hypocrisy to it, as there always will be within football, where we'll disagree with the principle of it, but we'll still take it when it comes for our club. And I think that's always the way.
But then there's the 3-up thing, and you'll appreciate this. Obviously, Lincoln had a little spell in the National League, didn't they, or the conference back in the day. I used to cover Halifax Town for a living, and when it was 1 up and 1 down. Now, 1 down's great, because if you're in the football league, you've got very little chance of going down, but 1 up's an absolute disgrace. Yeah. When you've got teams like Notts County, Chesterfield, Wrexham and Stockport all in one division, who've all got relatively large fan bases, all pretty much traditional football league clubs, trying to get back in and spending some silly money as well. Yeah. When there are teams bumping along at the bottom of League Two, showing precious little ambition. Yeah. I support one of them. You think, well, you deserve it. I mean, I would be totally against 3 up, 3 down at the moment, given...
Really? I can't imagine why, Dave. I've got no idea as to why you're not a fan of that.
Given where my team is. Well, I know I'd be totally for it. Totally for it. But football especially is so much about self-interest in it. Anyway, I don't think, and it's funny because I don't think either of these clubs are about self-interest. I don't think Lincoln City, certainly Lincoln City aren't. And I don't think Burton Albion are about self-interest either. But, you know, they're about being a club in a community and trying to do the best for the community. And off the field, the Nordic Football Group have got it so right with fan parks. And I mean, that was the first day of the fan park when they played Lincoln City, and there were lots of people. I know the sun was shining, and it's a lot easier, isn't it, when the sun's shining to fill a fan park. But off the field, they've got it so right. and they're still heavily involved in the community. That they're going to have supporters representatives giving them their views or the views of the supporters and stuff like that, which is fantastic. But some clubs, I'm not so sure.
I'm with you on that. I think off the field can mean so much more than on the field, and I think that's again, with Lincoln, doesn't matter what's happening on it. Of course it does. It does. Saturday 3 till 5 p.m. Saturday nights, it will always matter what's happening on the pitch. But that pre-match day, everything else around the match day experience, it means so much about what the club are doing. And to be fair, I think again, Lincoln are doing that right, and it's really nice to hear that Burton, although I think we sort of knew already that Burton kind of had that air to them anyway, to properly hear it being enforced under new ownership, where there is maybe a little bit more money being spent on the pitch. It's very easy to neglect what's happening off it, but the fact they're not doing it is always positive to hear, because you want a thriving League One as a community just as much as on the pitch.
Yeah, and it's about going to the match, seeing the people that you see at the football, some of whom you don't necessarily see throughout the rest of the week, and that kind of thing. You catch up, and you can have a chat, and you can wait outside until 2:20 or whatever, and have a couple of drinks, and then go in and hopefully enjoy what you watch. But that community side of it is so important. It's so important, especially down at League One and League Two level, where a lot of the smaller clubs, for obvious reasons, operate.
No, 100. Yeah, absolutely agree on that one. Right. So when we do the previews, we always end with one particular prediction, as I'm sure you can kind of guess what that prediction is. Looking ahead to the game on Saturday, but I actually want to, kind of throw one out to you and give you two predictions to make. I want, first of all, a score prediction for Saturday, and second of all, nice and simple, that is definitely not simple. Will Burton Albion be a League One side next season?
If you hadn't told me what the second one was, I might have guessed it, because I get asked the question all the time.
You should have a rehearsed answer by now, then, shouldn't you?
Well, you'd be surprised to know that I can talk on the subject. Burton have got a really good recent record at Lincoln. I think they won on their last two trips there. They secured their League One status there 2 years ago. Gassana Hadmi scored a goal from a very tight angle, as I recall, on a Tuesday night, I think it was. So I don't see any reason why they can't win again. The travelling in hope rather than expectation aspect of most football fans, there is a lot more hope, as I said earlier, now than there was September, October, November, early December. I mean, I would have told you straight up they will lose this game, because they were just losing as a matter of routine. What I would say is, if they go behind, don't write them off. Don't think you're just going to suddenly steamroll Burton if you take the lead, no matter how early. Rotherham took a really early lead at the Pirelli Stadium and got beaten quite handily in the end. So I'm going to go for a Burton win. I might not have done after Bristol Rovers, but the way they responded after the Bristol Rovers defeat, which wasn't 3-1, they were really pushing forward to make it 2-2 when they conceded the third. But it was 3-1. I don't see any reason why Burton can't win. I couldn't really say anything else, just in case any Burton fans are watching. Will they be a League One side next season? I still think the gap's down to 2 points going into the weekend. Why not? However, it's going to take one of Exeter, Bristol Rovers, Northampton, or Peterborough to drop into that bottom four, and the remaining three to stay in there. Now, not a week goes by when I don't expect Peterborough to suddenly rediscover their form. I mean, they've been a top end of the table side for forever. They can't quite hack it in the Championship, but they're always really good in League One. But they seem to have imploded. I know Poku's been injured for most of the season, and he was the major source of goals. Northampton Town have had this resurgence under Nolan. Will that continue? I'm not sure that it will. Exeter City, until the cup tie with Nottingham Forest, when they apparently played an entirely new defence, have been dropping like a stone. And you're thinking, well, they're going to get into it, but now they just seem to have bottomed out before they get there. And then you look further afield. Mansfield, what's happened to Mansfield? There are enough teams in poor form that for Burton to take advantage. Will they stay up this season? I know that I'll get around to answering the question in a minute.
Hey, no.
You know what? I think they will, and this will be the greatest of the great escapes that they've had over the last 2 or 3 years. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank had the first great escape when he took over from Jake Buxton, and they were in the bottom 4. And then when Hasselbank left after a poor start to the following season, Dino Marmry managed to keep them up against the odds as well. I think that was the Dino Marmry, for goodness sake. I think that was the Lincoln City when they clinched it. It was 4 games or so before the end of the season, so it was nice and comfortable.
Yeah.
Martin Patterson kept them up. Well, he didn't keep them up. Everybody else was worse than them. They lost on the last day 3-0 at Fleetwood and managed to stay up because Cheltenham were rubbish. And why not? Let's make 4 great escapes in a row. 4 in a row. That would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? But I think now they've got a manager who, apart from the fact that he's had success at Blackpool and getting them out of League 2, so he will be a very good manager to have next season should they go down. They've got a manager who knows what he's doing. They've got a manager who's worked in difficult circumstances. At Blackpool, he was working in the midst of the boycott of the Oyston regime. And they only took 10,000 to Wembley for the playoff final, Blackpool. Big club like that, you'd expect them to take more, wouldn't you? But no, they were boycotting it. Fair play to them for doing that. Before that, he'd worked at Blackburn under the Venkies. And more recently, he's worked at Salford under the class of 92, who, despite one of their members saying you should give managers time, sack managers on a fairly regular basis because they're not quite good enough to get promotion. So he's worked in really difficult circumstances as well. I think he's got what it takes. The coaching side of it with him and Pat Lyons and John Brayford has certainly made an improvement. They're scoring goals. You just hope the next level of striker down isn't necessarily there. Julian Larson, who signed from Forest in the summer's only played a match or 2, so he's relatively inexperienced. And Fabio Tavares, bless him, who would have been one of the backups, came off the bench at Bristol Rovers, scored the equalising goal and pulled his hamstring and is now out for 6 to 8 weeks. And that's only the second or third appearance since he arrived on loan from Coventry. So the squad's a little bit thin at the moment. But if they can get that bit of luck with injuries especially, there's no reason why they can't be a League One side next season and renew acquaintances with not only Lincoln City, but Derby County.
Yeah, absolutely. And that certainly looks like it could be happening next season, couldn't it?
That's a whole different podcast, that one.
That certainly is. That certainly is. Look, obviously, it's going to be a difficult last kind of, 8 weeks, 9 weeks probably to the end of the season. We're not far off, are we? It is. It's really come around quickly.
We just started. 14 matches to go.
Well, there you go. It feels really weird to say that. It feels really weird to say
the first 20.
Well, let's hope that you don't waste the last 14 in the same vein then. We'll say the last 13 then. You can waste Saturday as much as you want. But look, the last time Burton visited Bank, it ended up with you getting our manager sacked. Obviously, I very much hope that
own goal. It was an own goal, and was that the own goal game?
Was it an own goal? It was. It was. I want to say it was a Jack Burrows own goal, but I think it was a.
I didn't call it as an own goal, I don't think, but it went down as an own goal.
I didn't think it was an own goal. I was literally just about to say, I believe that was quite a dubious one as well.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, and it was. But we also got a man sent off in Danny Mandroyu, who then got slated after the game in the post-match presser, and just everything boiled up into.
It's a poor challenge to be fair.
It was. But it all ended up with Mark Kennedy being sacked. Obviously, very much hope that isn't the case with Michael Skubala this week.
No.
And the curse of Burton doesn't strike again. Not that I think that it would in any way, shape, or form. Look, And who knows what the rest of the season is going to hold for you guys. I very much hope that you do stay up for one reason and one reason only, because we would love to have a chat with you this time next season, Dave. Because as ever, this has been very enjoyable. So thank you so much for coming on and for
apologies for
giving
being
us
so
all of your wisdom.
Long-winded, but hopefully there might be one or two pertinent points in there. Who knows?
Hey, trust me, I much prefer when the answers are long-winded. It means that I have to talk less and I don't have to think about the questions so hard, because I just let you speak, which works perfectly. So yeah, like I say, Dave, thank you so much for coming on. For all of those who will be at the game, whether you're Lincoln fans, Burton fans, or simply neutrals going to the game on Saturday, enjoy. If you are watching online, enjoy watching that as well. Enjoy listening to commentary. Just enjoy the game. It should certainly be a cracker, maybe not quite as eventful as the first game of the season, though. Time will have to tell on that one. But until next time, up the Imps.